Welcome to Buckets, Action Network's WNBA betting podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm Maria Marino, excited to have Andrew O'Connor-Watts here making his debut on Buckets WNBA. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm great. I'm excited to be on.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. This is an interesting slate. We're going to be talking best bets for Tuesday, July 16th. 4-game slate. I'm calling it breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a nightcap because we got a very early tip-off, 11:30 a.m. Eastern with the Mercury and Mystics, all the way to a 10 p.m. Eastern tip on Amazon Prime. Now, Andrew, you are on the West Coast. You are our resident Valkyries fan. Are you going to be getting up early to watch some hoops at, 8:30 a.m.?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, especially since this is the game that I have the most attention on from a betting perspective. I'm definitely getting up for 8:30 for sure.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, good. We'll hit that game first, and as always, we'll touch on all the games. So hopefully, if you're listening, you get some ideas of what you want to bet. But first, quick programming note: we are going to have another episode on Wednesday. That's the final day of games before All-Star and the Olympic break. So we're going to get you more. Dano Mataya is scheduled to join us for that. So don't miss it. Without further ado, though, let's get going. You said that this Mercury Mystics game, you have the most that you're keen on betting. So what's your best bet?
Yeah, so I have two in this game, and they're related. I have the Mystics in the first half +2, and for the full game +4.
All right, a little first half, full game.
Yep.
I have to say, I feel like at this point I have heard the legend of Washington in the first half. Like, it's definitely become a thing at this point. I personally have not, I have not participated yet. Maybe I will now, since we're going to talk it through and why you like that so much. But let me just kind of set the stage a little bit. Mystics have the best ATS record in the W. 16-7-1. They are 8-2 ATS in the last 10. This has kind of been trending in this direction, but it's finally gotten to the point where I'm looking at every other team and I'm like, yep, the Mystics are doing pretty well against the spread, as backed up by those numbers. So their last game was Sunday against Las Vegas. Again, case in point, lost but did cover as 12.5-point dogs against Vegas. Like I said, Ariel Atkins had 36. She was unstoppable. Now they're playing the Mercury, and I was a little concerned about what the injury report would look like because it's been a little strange for Phoenix the last few games. Brittany Griner got injured Friday. That was at Indy, but then she played Sunday. Mind you, it was a beatdown up in Connecticut. Diana Taurasi and Natasha Cloud also played, but just FYI, Shug Sutton and Chrisma Osborne are on the injury report for Tuesday. Now that that's out of the way, let's discuss this first half play.
Yeah, so, I mean, the Mystics have not been very good, but they're super fun. And that's kind of, and they've been good enough to cover spreads, as you mentioned, 16-7-1 ATS for the full games. But they're 18-6 in the first half, which is by far the best record in the WNBA. They're kind of fall into a pattern that I've noticed with W teams this year is that the teams that aren't very good tend to do well in the first half. So, I mentioned 18-6 for the Mystics. Next is the Chicago Sky, 14-7-2 against the spread in the first half. You have the Storm, 13-8-1 in the first half. Sparks, 12-9-1. So, obviously the Storm are great, but the rest of those teams are below 500. And honestly, teams like the Aces struggle in the first half. But anyways, that's kind of a more general note on the W. But these specific teams, with the Mystics in particular, they seem to come out with a lot of energy in these games. I wanted to look because I was like, I feel like they have a really high pace in the first half, and they don't. They're actually 9th in pace, but they, especially against the Aces, they had just they were just kind of relentless, just coming at the Aces. Had no problem keeping up with the Aces pace. I mean, they're the fastest paced team in the league. But they've just kind of gotten a lot of great stuff from kind of people that you wouldn't expect. So Maisha Hines-Allen and Stephanie Dolson are actually 2 of 6 players in the W shooting 50% from the field and 40% from 3. Now, Dolson's actually shooting 50% from 3 as well. So she's 50-50 club there.
Amazing.
Yeah. And like, just, looking at where she was last season with the Liberty, just kind of like a, kind of a tertiary role, and now kind of being, more of a bigger piece with the Mystics. Sure. I think they're kind of taking teams by surprise. And now, so, that first half play has been a wagon, right? 18-6-1 speaks for itself. But the reason I'm actually on the full game as well is that where I'd usually bet the first half, collect the money, just kind of, wipe my hands of the whole thing. Because they have the Mystics have these epic collapses in the fourth quarter. They have a minus 16.8 net rating in the fourth quarter, which, against teams like the Liberty and in Vegas, like I actually live bet Vegas at half last, just to recoup, because I knew, the script, right? Vegas is going to do a lot better second half. Mystics are going to have their collapse. Sure enough, that worked out. But with the Mercury in particular, who have also been a really fun team, Kalia Copper is having an amazing season. She's been so fun to watch. Natasha Cloud, former Mystic, has been great for the Mercury. Just a really fun team, having BG back, and, really offensive heavy team. But they don't do well on the road. That they really struggle on the road. And they're also not a great fourth quarter team, which is why I like the Mystics in the full game +4, because if they can kind of, if they're a little bit more immune to that fourth quarter collapse against the Mercury, I think that +4 is still a good number. And I would say I like that almost at any plus number. I think they could win this game outright.
Oh, interesting. Well, look, I mean, we saw what the Mystics did the last time they had a camp day game, and that was against Indiana, and they dismantled them, which was an upset. And obviously, this is, as discussed, an early tip-off. And I did notice, if you follow the crew in the Action app, you can obviously see what people are picking just by going to their profiles. But also, if you go to each specific matchup, you can hit the picks through there, and you can literally see everybody like in the Action universe who's betting this. And of course, I got to shout out, I'm calling them the Three Musketeers, but Danny Barlavi, Calvin Wetzel, and our guy Jim Turvey, who's on all the time. I saw they were on Washington for the full game, so I feel like you're in good company, although they were able to grab a +5.5.
That's true.
Before the number moved to 4. But look, I'm in agreement in terms of like the Mercury just haven't looked crisp, even with those other players back. I mentioned Taurasi, Brittany Griner, who obviously are huge for them. Maybe it's just Connecticut. I don't know. I don't think Washington's going to be way better, but going to Connecticut, I mean, they have struggled in 2 of those games in Connecticut this year, like absolutely got crushed. So I'm on board with it. I like the first half train though, because, and it's interesting you talked about that trend with not only the Mystics, but like the Sky. You mentioned the Storm, but especially the Sparks. I'm highlighting those 3, like the Sky, Sparks, and Mystics, because they're 3 teams that, are in the bottom part of the standings, but are all very competitive. And when it comes down to it, like they are lacking a little bit from a talent perspective, especially the Mystics, because they have these injuries.
Yeah.
But they're also at this point knowing that they're not necessarily trying to do everything in their power to win at all costs. Like, that's how I feel. I'm not saying they're not trying to win games. I'm just saying, like, they know what they are right now. They're not like, some of these other teams that, they are in a playoff race and they are expecting to make a deep playoff run.
Yeah, I don't want to accuse them of tanking, but maybe it's kind of not the least convenient thing to be really really bad in the fourth quarter when you're so good in the first quarter. I'll just put it that way.
Also, it might be a little bit of like kind of what you were saying before. Some of these teams probably underestimating them a little bit, and then having to adjust and say, okay, let's put this team away. Like enough messing around. Just a side note too, these two teams met back on May 23rd, and that was a Washington cover. Phoenix won by just 3. And I actually think the Mystics are playing so much better now, even with the injuries. Like they're just gelling so much more. Their younger players are getting a lot of confidence. So there we have it. Mystics +2 first half, +4 full game, going all in on Washington. You're going to know pretty early on Tuesday if you're going to have a good day. Because the game's going to be over pretty soon. Let's keep it moving, though. We got the next tip off is 3:30 p.m. Eastern. So this is kind of like a late lunch, early dinner for me, but this is straight up lunchtime for you. Yeah. Storm visiting the Sparks, and the Storm were favored by 9.5, now 8.5. First thing I need to point out, first road game since June 19th for Seattle. They played 9 straight at home, which is insane. This schedule, I've been harping on it for weeks now, but this schedule has been whack for the WNBA. Like, it's just been so weird for certain teams. But that being said, you play what your schedule is, and they went 7-2 straight up in that stretch at home. Last played against Atlanta on Sunday, won but no cover as 14-point favorites. Smoked Minnesota before that. In terms of these two teams meeting, they played back on June 11th. The Storm won by 16. Big games for the big three: Nneka, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Jewel Lloyd. Ezi Magbagor had 13 rebounds. Dearica Hamby a double-double. Ari McDonald 15 points. Sparks, as we know, not a good overall record. 6-17 straight up. 10-12-1 against the spread, and they last played Saturday in Dallas. Did win, did cover, but again, it was against Dallas. Any overall thoughts on this game, Andrew?
Not really. This is kind of one of those, like, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it's the first road game, as you mentioned, in a long time for the Storm, so that's always usually a pretty good spot. And I will say they only have one player going to the Olympics, as far as, if I'm not mistaken. Jewel Lloyd, I think, is the only one going. So I don't.
Ezi might be going for Australia.
Okay. Oh, right. True. Yeah. Good point.
It's hard to keep track of all the international players. And actually, since you brought that up, it's a good time to mention, too, to kind of keep an eye on that, because these are, as mentioned, the last couple of games before the break. And some Olympians may be resting a little bit or taking it easy before the break. But continue. Yeah.
I mean, they've had the best. So the Storm have had the best defense in the last month or so. And I think that probably is, I'm sure being at home for pretty much the whole time is probably helps with that. But this is kind of a funny game for me because, the Sparks they're like you said, they don't have the best record. They don't have the best overall team. But they are pretty good in the first half. So I'm always kind of tempted by that first half look. So I do, I project using a model, and my model really likes the Sparks in the first half. And they are 12-9-1 in the first half. The Sparks are, with the Storm being 13-8-1. It's a little bit sketchy for me just to bet on them. I mean, I will say that what the Sparks have going for them is they don't have anyone, as far as I know. I could be now you might have to correct me again, but I don't think they have anyone going to the Olympics, do they?
Dearica Hamby now, but for the 3-on-3 team.
Got it.
She wasn't originally on it. It was Cam Brink. Because her ACL is now replaced by Hamby. So she's
got it.
3-on-3 team.
So, But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Brink. So she's been, out for a while now. Fun fact, she's still 5th in blocks, even though she hasn't played in like a month. Um, just a little
Wild.
fun tidbit there.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, anyways, I don't have a lot on this game, to be honest. First half, I believe, is now +6, 5.5 maybe at some.
Okay.
But yeah, I
Okay.
think you could
Okay.
still find a +6 out there. What do you think? Do you
Hmm.
like it? Is it a stay away?
So
What do you think?
it's tempting. It's tempting because it is the first half that we talked about.
Yeah.
I said this, I vowed to Jim on our last episode that I would probably avoid betting the Sparks just
Yeah.
because I feel like Kurt Miller has been experimenting way too much for my liking with the lineups. But that being said, that's really more so props, you know? I still we know the Sparks have been competitive even when they're not actually finishing these games. I feel like I could be convinced into like a Sparks first half. I'm very close.
Okay. We'll
Sparks
put a
plus
pin in
6
it.
first half. I want nothing to do with the full game.
No,
No way.
me neither.
But uh and that's not to say that they won't cover. I just don't feel personally drawn to it.
Totally.
But the first half, I'm warming up to that one.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I like
Oh,
it.
by the way, I found another. I forgot Sammy Whitcomb as well on the Storm is an Australian Olympian.
Okay. There we
A
go.
lot of Australian Olympians in the WNBA, so something to keep an eye on. All right, so we'll move on. We'll keep it moving, just because not too many bets on that particular game. Let's talk about, I think, probably the best game on the slate. Actually, both of the Amazon games are pretty good, I think. The first one is 7 p.m. Eastern, Sun at Liberty. Now, New York was favored by 5.5. I'm seeing 4.5 now. And I'll say the same thing I did last week on Buckets WNBA, because these two teams just played last week. And that is that the Liberty have owned them the last 2 seasons. So I just double checked everything, and the Liberty are 9-1 straight up, including playoffs against the Sun the last 2 seasons. 6-4 ATS, which I find a little bit interesting. Now, neither of those ATS wins for the Sun are this season. Both of them this season, New York has won and covered. But I mentioned they did play last week, Wednesday the 10th. New York just managed to cover that spread. It was a 2.5 point spread. They won 71-68. Brianna Stewart had 18 and 14. Here's the thing about Stewie. Once again, talking about Olympians. We know she is playing on the Olympic 5-on-5 squad, and she was out of the lineup that last game Saturday against Chicago. Didn't matter. New York still won. Got to their 20th win of the season. They remain first in the standings. But what I find interesting is I'm pretty sure she was listed on the injury report prior to that game with like a knee issue. Now she's just listed as rest on the Liberty injury report. And that makes me think that they wouldn't even bother putting her on the injury report if they weren't going to rest her. So I'm not necessarily expecting Stewie to be playing here on Tuesday. How do you feel about the Sun side of things? And I'll just say this, because the Liberty actually have a couple other injuries too. Kayla Thornton randomly is questionable, and she's a much more important piece than I think people realize. Niara Sabali is also questionable. She's been in and out of the lineup the whole year. But Banaja Laney Hamilton will miss her 4th straight game. And again, she is she is typically a starter. She's a key contributor. So this might be finally the time that the Sun do get one against the Liberty.
Yeah, I mean, and especially, Thornton being questionable if she's out, I think with Betnijah, Laney Hamilton being out, that's like more impactful than if Laney Hamilton was in. So that kind of, it just kind of compounds with all the the more injuries there are, the worse it becomes each little one. It's like exponential rather than an addition or subtraction, if you will. But And I, obviously Stewie is massive, so her status is huge. But I do, despite the ownership, the absolute ownership, I do lean Sun. I mean, I feel like they're in the position, they have more to gain from like trying in this game, right? I mean, they're a little bit behind the Liberty in the standings. They've lost a lot to the Liberty in recent times, which
Right.
again, it's like, do you go with the revenge factor or is it ownership factor? Like, which do you weigh more? And I think under normal circumstances, I might give a little bit more attention to the ownership factor. But I think with this break coming up, I do feel like, and like you mentioned, that's a really good point, mentioning that Stewie's labeled as rest this time makes it seem like it might be more of a sure thing, or at least more likely that she's out than under normal circumstances, that it's more of like a precautionary thing. So that also just makes me lean towards the Sun. It's funny because I mentioned my model. Like, my model actually likes the Liberty, assuming that Stewie's in. If it didn't, I probably would fully be on the Sun. But obviously, if Stewie's out, I think that's I'm probably going to be on the Sun, depending on the number. But if Stewie is out, just because I think, with Benaj out, the possibility of Thornton being out, I just think it's kind of a lot. They're getting a little thin. And the Sun, I think they just have a little bit more motivation to get a win coming out, like leaving and heading into this Olympic break.
Yeah, for sure. I do think they are motivated. I do think they know the ownership factor.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're very much aware that, hey, they lost to this team 3-1 in the playoffs last year. They lost both games so far this year. They lost every regular season meeting last year. Like, it's starting to pile up here where Jim and I would joke a lot about the whole like hashtag disrespect with the CT on the end. Like, yeah, the Connecticut Sun have been considered one of the best teams in the league for the past 2 years, but they have not been able to beat the Liberty. And so can you really be considered a top team? And, they were first in the standings for a while. New York overtook them. Now they're second, second place, second fiddle. So, I do think they're aware of it. Granted, Alyssa Thomas is an Olympian as well, but she's just not, she's not one to rest. We'll say that. I haven't heard any rumblings about any injuries or anything of that nature. Sabrina Ionescu is also an Olympian, but she has actually been, we call Alyssa Thomas the engine on Connecticut. Sab has kind of been the engine for New York of late. Like, even though Stewie, for the most part, has been playing well, Jonquel has been playing well, it feels like everything just sort of starts and ends with Sabrina. She gets them going, and she's been playing clutch minutes and making clutch plays at the end. But she seems to be, spry and, wanting to go off into this break on a high note. So I think she's going to do everything she can. She had 21 in the last game against Connecticut. What I do think you should look for, I would be ready for the injury report, and I would be targeting somebody's rebounds if Stewie's out. Because, I mean, she's averaging double-digit rebounds. I mentioned she had 14 boards in the last game. I think Alyssa Thomas is one to maybe look at on the rebounding side of things, especially if Stewie is out. Jonquel has obviously been a beast on the boards. I mean, her line is probably inflated. Let's see what it's at right now. 10.5.
That's
which is actually not bad for JJ.
Okay.
I'm seeing 10.5 right now at -106, but would be curious what that would be without Stewie. But I would look at Sabrina even.
Yeah.
See, right now she's at 4.5. The line, but I'm seeing juice of like -158. I really don't have an interest in betting that, but definitely like take a peek at some of these if Stewie's going to be out. Alyssa Thomas 9.5 right now. I'm seeing +102. It's a little tempting.
Yeah.
So that's That's an angle that I would definitely look at.
I kind of like look, I'll caveat with I don't bet a lot of props in
Sure.
NBA or WNBA, but I do kind of like the idea of like JJ, like someone on the Liberty rather than like someone on the Sun, just
Sure.
because, like Alyssa Thomas, like because yeah, I just think that just opens up more opportunity for JJ. She's probably gonna be playing, she's gonna have more usage anyways. I do want to shout out Alyssa Thomas, kind of off topic, but shout out
Okay.
Alyssa Thomas from
Okay.
last game. She made one of the coolest, smartest plays I've ever seen.
Really?
Well, not ever seen, but it was just, the kind of the epitome of like a big brain, like veteran move where, so it was closing out the first quarter, and she dribbles the ball off her foot and it goes into the backcourt. So it's a backcourt violation. She kind of like saunters over pretty slowly, and so does, I forget who it was. I want to say it was,
I think it was Natasha Cloud. She like boxed her out essentially.
yes, that's who it's exactly.
Yeah.
So, and she just boxes Natasha Cloud out so that the clock keeps running and they don't have a possession to then score at the end. And it was a brilliant move. Go look it up. I posted about it on Twitter at NBA Watts. Check it out.
Oh,
But
love it.
anyways, I just thought that was like, it's one of those moves where you just, as a basketball fan, you watch it and it's just like chef's kiss in the moment. You just, you love to see it.
I don't know if you'd want to check on Sabrina, but I noticed this. I told you I didn't really want to bet her over 4.5 boards at minus 158, but you can get 6+ rebounds for her currently at plus 134, which I kind of like. She had 5 in the last game, and she's certainly capable of getting 6 rebounds, especially for how much you talk about usage. Like she's just, as I mentioned, she tends to play almost the entire game, and if it's a tight game, she's going to be even more hard to find. It's going to be harder for Sandy Brondello to rest her if it is a tight game, which we're expecting it to be. So I'm kind of, now that we're kind of talking, I kind of like Sab 6+ boards. So I might throw that in.
I just found, so her defensive rebounding percentage goes up pretty significantly without Breanna Stewart on the court. So the way they have it in PvP is like 0.106 and 0.12, 120. So I'm guessing that's like, assuming that's 10.6% versus 12%. It's kind of, but yeah, so I mean that feels like a pretty significant jump that's her defensive rebounding percentage for Sabrina. But yeah, so that's not a bad little look there.
All right. Well, look, I don't mind being like in the lab.
Yeah.
Because this is giving me ideas. But so you're leaning Sun for the full game. Like I mentioned, I kind of like Sabrina over rebounds, especially 6+, I should say, rebounds, especially if Breanna Stewart is out. And feel like it's kind of trending that way. So I may just get a jump on that.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to the next game?
Yeah.
All right. We got one more game. This is another, I think, exciting one. Sky visiting the Aces, 10 o'clock Eastern on Amazon Prime. Aces were favored by 14.5. It's now down to 13.5. But I still feel like the Chicago Sky, I nicknamed them my Scrappy Sky back in preseason. I still feel like even the games that they lose pretty handily, like they're another one of those teams that they are competing. But unlike the Sparks and the Mystics, I really think the Sky are trying their darndest to make playoffs, and they are expecting to make playoffs. So I think they're in a little bit of a different tier. And the Aces they haven't been the same, right? They just haven't been the same this season. They're 16-7 straight up, 10-13 against the spread, and they lost their last 2 against the spread. Washington and Atlanta were both games in which the dog covered. Meanwhile, the Sky 9-14 straight up and against the spread, which is very interesting because judging by that, because I certainly don't expect them to win this game, judging by that trend, maybe they won't cover just because they tend to either win or kind of get blown out. So the Sky, though, just lost back-to-back games against New York. Their last game was Saturday at home. These two teams did play June 27th, and I found this very interesting. So Vegas won by 12. They were favored by 10.5, so that was a cover.
Mm-hmm.
A'ja Wilson had 31 points, normal, only 6 rebounds. And I saw that and I said, that's odd because whatever. Like her last 5 games, 17, 18, 20, 10, and 12 in terms of rebounds. And when I checked the game log, it was in fact her lowest rebounding total of the season. So I took a peek at her rebounding line. So it's at 12.5. She's actually favored to go under 12.5 at -140.
Yeah.
That's an amount of juice that I just don't really feel like betting, even though I think there is a good chance she goes under it. But also, why am I going to lay that juice for the under when I've just told you her past 5 rebounding totals are way over, even though I know this is an interesting matchup and Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso are all over the boards. I get all that, but I'm still like, am I really going to fade A'ja Wilson at -140? I don't think so. The over, but at the same time, I don't want to bet her over 12.5 just because I think that I do think the matchup comes into play there. So that was just something that I saw. Reese had 11 boards the last matchup. Cardoso had 8 boards. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thoughts would be that it definitely seems matchup related with Angel Reese and Cardoso there. Those are two, large presences down low. They get a lot of rebounds. Well, that large presences, but no, but I mean, I think that's relevant, right? And she only had, A'ja only had 6 rebounds against them. Now that could have just been a weird fluky game, but to me it makes sense. And I think maybe the answer or the solution to your conundrum of not wanting to deal with that juice is if you can get alt under boards. I don't know if that's like I said, not a big props guy, but if you could do alt under for maybe sell some boards for A'ja and get get an under 9.5 or 8.5 or something at some nice plus money, that could be a route to take instead.
I could be wrong on this, but I don't think we have as many alts offered for W as you would NBA.
Makes sense.
I don't really see I'm not really seeing alt lines. I'm seeing other markets record 10 plus, record 12 plus, whatever. Yeah. But not really that alt line, which that would be good.
I mean and so if we are just dealing with that line, then I mean, to me that does seem high. I mean, I know she's you mentioned she's cleared it a lot, but against the team that has such a great rebounding duo as the Sky does, I think that seems high to me. But maybe you go a little smaller or something, but
I think I've already talked myself out of it, but I think maybe a different solution could be just to go back and target Cardoso, which I'm pretty sure, I can't remember now, but I'm pretty sure I bet her over on rebounds last week or something like that, and it's at 8.5 right now. The over is -118, and but she did have 8 the last game. 8 seems to be her sweet spot. She gets 8 rebounds a lot. So anyhow, was there? Oh, go on.
Yeah, I think you were about to ask. Was there something else? With that game, did I get that?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
All right, there you go. So yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Sky kind of being your scrappy Sky being in these games that they don't really have any business being in. And, again, I was looking at the Sky in the first half, not to sound like a broken record here, but this is another example of two teams that are kind of opposites, Jekyll and Hyde first and second halves. So the Sky are 14-7-2 in the first half, but only 9-14 ATS for the full game. So whereas the Aces just 8-15-1 ATS in the first half, but 10-13 for the full game. Now they, obviously some of 12 of those games were without Chelsea Gray to start, who is a massive presence, and she's been, honestly, like, transformed this team. I mean, they were 6-6 to start. That's just straight up 6-6, and they've gone 10-1 since she's joined. So that's what's kind of keeping me away from this being like a full on best bet. My model puts this in a range that is pretty substantial. Had a good hit rate so far this year, so it's tempting. But also, you mentioned the Three Musketeers. They are on the Aces full game. I don't necessarily want to go against their looks. But yes, exactly. But this is also it's a different bet. I'm not going, so to me, I definitely don't think it's out of the question that the Sky could cover the first half and then kind of do what these, sub 500 teams have been doing and kind of crater in the second half. But the other thing is that they had a great first quarter last time against the Aces, the Sky did. And then it just kind of, that cratering actually almost happened in the second quarter. Where the Aces kind of came back and they ended up not covering the first half last game. So, I mean, I don't necessarily hate it either, though.
How about Chicago Sky first quarter spread plus 4.5?
I'd kind of like that. I do like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I kind of like that.
Yeah.
I definitely am leaning to your point, like first quarter or first half.
Yeah.
But now that you mention it, I can definitely see the Aces settling in and making quick work. So maybe plus 4.5. I'm seeing minus 118. I kind of like that.
Yeah. Also, another wait, you said the first quarter was plus 4.5?
Yep.
Ooh, that's
good. What was first half?
First half was plus 8, which is also solid. Good. But 4.5 for the first quarter when they were pretty much, I think they were tied at the first quarter last game. And also, and again, to bring in the Olympics to this, the Aces have a lot of Olympians. They could be looking ahead kind of like last game before break. I think that the Sky could be kind of scrappy here. So yeah,
okay.
Go.
So I just pulled up the box score from the last game.
Yeah.
Chicago was winning by 4 after 1.
Ooh, even better than I thought.
So,
yeah.
But then to your point, you remember correctly, the second quarter, Chicago only scored 14 points to the Aces 25.
Yeah. I like that first quarter look. I think that's that's far enough.
Even better, since I'm on the East Coast, I don't have to stay up too late because I execute the first quarter and then go from there. But yeah, I mean, I wrote down too just everything we've been talking about with all these Olympians: Gray, Wilson, Plum, Young. Like last game before the break.
Yep.
Going into All-Star break. Like, I mean, the only thing I would say is the Sky have had a lot of buzz around them, particularly because of Angel Reese and the double streak. Even though that came to an end, like I know that teams kind of not quite to the degree that they get up for Caitlin Clark, but like they definitely are aware. I mean, you saw when the Liberty played the Sky that they were like very aware of like what was going on with Angel. So, they might want to just assert themselves just because it's a hyped player. I would think that it's going to be another big crowd. I was at the Sky Liberty game last week in New York, and there were large pockets of Angel Reese fans, Chicago fans. Like it was pretty significant. I mean, the crowd was definitely, still on New York side, but there were definitely reactions from people in the crowd, and she's getting fans to kind of travel. So that is something to keep in mind. But yeah, I'm kind of feeling first quarter.
Maybe go a little. Maybe we just go small on the first quarter and yeah.
And one other thing, you know what I meant to mention too, Kennedy Carter struggled in the last game. against New York. For whatever reason, she just wasn't shooting particularly well, and she ended up only playing, I want to say, like 16 minutes, even though she started to find her way a little bit more in the second half, started to play better.
Yeah.
I think if I were to bet on anything, it would be a Kennedy Carter bounce back.
Yeah.
So let me just peep her line real quick while we're at it. Kennedy Carter, over 19 and a half plus 100. I don't know about all of that.
Yeah, it seems high.
She had 20 in the first meeting.
Yeah, okay, barely covered or barely went over.
Pull up her game log real quick. The people on the pod today are like, wow, we are going for it. We're almost done, people, but let me just look at this one more thing. Yeah, I mean, like before, so last game she had 7 points, but before that it was 22, 19, 21, 33, 26. 2 of those games were against Seattle, 2 were against Atlanta. But she had 22 in the first game against New York. I mean, she's somebody that, and look, I would say the guards on Vegas are very, they're very quick, they're very athletic, so that might, hinder her a little bit. But for the most part, Kennedy Carter can get whatever she wants, whenever she wants, like in that mid range. And I would just be shocked if she had 2 bad shooting games in a row.
Yeah.
So that's another look I have. And I think that's all of my thoughts on that game. Have I left anything out?
No, I think the only thing I want to add is the Sky actually have a better first quarter net rating than the Aces do in the first quarter. And I want to.
Well, that settles it then. Yeah. I'm gonna ride with you here on this. Sky plus 4.5 first quarter. Well, look, I hope the listeners didn't mind being a little patient today. We went a little bit longer, but as I said, this was the debut for Andrew O'Connor Watts on Buckets WNBA. So we had some, we had some catching up to do, had some, got to get in the flow. We got to build some chemistry, much like the players do.
Exactly.
And you already mentioned it, but I'm going to repeat at NBA Watts on Twitter. I'm just going to keep calling it Twitter. And on the Action app, in case he logs anything, bright and early for Tuesday. But thanks for coming on the pod, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. Yeah, I'm going to go log that first quarter bet right now after this. So there we go.
All right, and I'll be sticking by you, as I said. But once again, we are Buckets presented by BetMGM, and we're going to be back Wednesday, final day of games before the All-Star Olympic break. I can't believe it's here already. Thanks again. Let's get Buckets.